I raised my son for 5 years before learning he was actually my brother's child. My revenge was perfect. I've always been the ghost in my own home. The quiet one, the invisible one. While most kids complain about overprotective parents, I'd have given anything for my mother to simply notice me. My name is Jason Mitchell, and I learned to be self-sufficient before I knew how to tie my shoes. Books became my escape. In their pages, I found worlds where people like me mattered, where quiet, thoughtful characters weren't punishments to their families. I kept to myself, worked hard in school, and never asked for much. All I wanted was fairness, but in the Mitchell household, that was too much to ask for. My brother Caleb is everything I'm not. Charming, outgoing, mischievous, and my mother's undisputed favorite. From the moment he was born, he became the sun around which our family orbits. Mom does everything for him, cooks his favorite meals, washes his clothes, even though he's 14 and makes excuses for his every mistake. He's just being a boy, she'd say when he broke something. But when I spilled milk at age 7, clean it up, Jason. You're the older one. Act like it. What makes it worse is that Caleb knows. He sees the imbalance and exploits it mercilessly. He doesn't just accept my mother's favoritism, he weaponizes it against me. Last month, he found my journal. I came home to find him reading my private thoughts aloud to his friends in the living room. They laughed as he mocked my handwriting, my hopes, my insecurities about my height and thick glasses. When I tried to grab it back, he held it above my head, a cruel reminder that even at 16, I'm still shorter than my younger brother. "What's wrong, Four Eyes? Can't reach it?" he taunted while Mom sat in the kitchen, pretending not to hear. School offers no refuge. Caleb has made sure of that. He's turned his friends against me, spreading rumors, making me an outcast. I've tried patience, thinking he'd grow out of it. He hasn't. Last week, after I confronted him about stealing money from my drawer, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Why don't you just kill yourself? Nobody would even notice you're gone." The words hit me like physical blows. I was already struggling, already feeling worthless, and my own brother had just confirmed my darkest thoughts. This wasn't childish teasing. This was hatred. And in that moment, I realized something had to change. I thought Caleb couldn't get worse. I was wrong. Last month, I poured my usual morning cereal and felt something hard crunch between my teeth. Small pebbles scattered throughout the bowl. I nearly broke a molar. When I confronted Mom, showing her the rocks in my breakfast, she just laughed. "That's just how brothers bond, Jason. Don't be so sensitive." Bond? Is that what she called it? 2 days later, Caleb knocked my glasses off my face while I was studying. As I scrambled to catch them before they hit the floor, he stepped forward, hovering his foot above them. He didn't crush them, but the message was clear. He could have. The only thing stopping him was the thrill of watching me squirm. But the incident that finally changed everything happened in the school hallway. I was at my locker when I smelled something burning. I turned to find Caleb holding a lighter inches from my hair, a look of pure malice in his eyes. I jerked away just in time, but the acrid smell of my singed hair lingered in my nostrils for days. A teacher saw it happen and reported it to our parents. That night, for the first time in my life, I heard my father's voice rise in genuine anger. Not at me, but for me. "This isn't sibling rivalry anymore, Deborah," he shouted at my mother. "This is criminal behavior. One more incident like this and I'm calling the police. I don't care if he's our son." Caleb's face when Dad said those words, I'll never forget it. Pure shock. The golden child had finally crossed a line that even Mom couldn't explain away. Later that evening, Dad knocked on my bedroom door. He sat on the edge of my bed looking older than I'd ever seen him. "I owe you an apology, Jason," he said quietly. "I always thought Caleb was just being a typical little brother. I didn't see what was really happening." His words were like rainfall after years of drought. Someone finally saw. Someone finally believed me. "He's a bully," Dad continued, "and I've been blind to it. That ends now." The next day, Dad drove me to a local MMA gym. I was confused until he explained. "I can't be with you every moment to protect you," he said, "but I can make sure you can protect yourself." 3 months into training, I caught my reflection in the gym mirror and barely recognized myself. My shoulders were broader, my stance more confident. But the real change was inside. For the first time, I felt strong, capable, like I deserved to take up space in the world. I wondered if Caleb noticed the change in me, if he sensed the shift in power between us. Most importantly, I wondered if he would finally leave me alone, or if this was just the calm before an even bigger storm. Freedom came in the form of a scholarship letter. When I was accepted to Westlake University with a full ride, I felt like I could finally breathe. My father beamed with pride when I showed him the acceptance letter. Mom, predictably, managed only a distracted, "That's nice, honey," before asking if I'd seen Caleb's football cleats. The morning I left for college, Dad hugged me tightly and slipped a $100 bill into my pocket. "I'm proud of you, son," he whispered. Mom gave me a perfunctory kiss on the cheek, her eyes already drifting toward the house where Caleb was still sleeping. My brother hadn't even bothered to wake up to say goodbye. I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I was escaping. I was free. College was everything I hoped it would be. I excelled in my classes, made actual friends, and for once wasn't living in anyone's shadow. Then, during my sophomore year, I met Karen Stevens in my American literature class. She was brilliant, vibrant, and when she smiled at me, something inside me that had been coiled tight for years finally relaxed. "You know," she told me on our third date, "you should laugh more often. You have a great laugh." No one had ever said anything like that to me before. With Karen, I found myself doing things I never thought possible, talking to strangers, going to parties, even occasionally being the center of attention. She saw something in me that no one else had bothered to look for. When she told me she was pregnant during our senior year, I didn't panic. Instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. Having grown up in a Catholic family, I knew what I needed to do. I proposed the following week, and we married in a small ceremony 2 months after graduation. Our son, Benjamin, was born healthy and perfect. For the first few years, we were happy, truly happy. I had the family I'd always wanted, the love I'd always craved. I threw myself into being the kind of father I wished I'd had, and Karen seemed content in our life together. The first sign of trouble came in an email I found accidentally. Karen had been seeing her married coworker for months. I was devastated but determined not to let our family fall apart. We went to counseling. She promised it would never happen again. A year later, I discovered text messages between her and an ex-boyfriend. Again, I forgave. Again, we tried to rebuild. I couldn't bear the thought of Benjamin growing up in a broken home, the way I essentially had despite my parents' marriage. "We can get through this," I told her. "For Benjamin's sake, we have to try." What a fool I was. Last Tuesday, Karen sat me down at our kitchen table. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. "Jason, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you years ago." The words that followed destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life. "Benjamin might not be yours." The room seemed to tilt sideways as she continued. "It's Caleb. Your brother Caleb. We've been seeing each other on and off since before our wedding. My brother, my wife, my son, possibly not my son." The betrayal was so complete, so perfectly orchestrated to cause maximum pain, that I couldn't even scream. I just sat there, feeling the last pieces of my carefully constructed life crumble around me. That night, I packed a suitcase in silence. Karen begged, cried, tried to explain. I didn't say a word. There was nothing left to say. I walked out the door of what I'd thought was my home, carrying nothing but a bag of clothes and 18 years of accumulated betrayal. I drove straight to my parents' house that night. I wasn't thinking clearly, just following some primal instinct to return to my origins when my world collapsed. It was nearly midnight when I rang their doorbell, my suitcase still in the car. Dad opened the door in his bathrobe, confusion turning to concern when he saw my face. "Jason, what's wrong, son?" Mom appeared behind him, her hair in curlers. For once, she actually looked at me, really looked, and seemed to register that something was terribly wrong. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd eaten countless silent breakfasts as a child while Mom fussed over Caleb. I told them everything. Karen's infidelity, the possibility that Benjamin wasn't mine, and finally, the identity of her lover. "That's impossible," Mom interrupted, her voice shrill. "Caleb would never do that to you. He's your brother." Dad said nothing, but I watched his knuckles turn white as he gripped his coffee mug. "I don't believe it," Mom continued. "Karen must be lying to protect someone else." I pulled out my phone. Let's find out. I called Caleb, putting the phone on speaker but signaling my parents to stay quiet. Jason? Caleb sounded wary. It's late, man. What do you want? I know about you and Karen, I said simply. What are you talking about? His denial was immediate, but there was an edge to his voice. Fear. Karen told me everything, Caleb. The affair before our wedding, the times you were together after, Benjamin possibly being your son. There was a long pause. Look, Caleb finally said, his voice shifting into the smooth, manipulative tone I knew too well. Karen came on to me, okay? What was I supposed to do? She's hot and she was practically begging for it. Not my fault if your wife prefers me over you. Always been that way, hasn't it? People choosing me? I looked up to see my father's face transform with rage, and my mother's drain of all color. Dad snatched the phone from my hand. You listen to me, you little shit, he roared into the speaker. You betrayed your brother. You betrayed this family. You are no son of mine. Do you understand? Dad, wait. Caleb's voice took on a panicked quality I'd never heard before. Don't dad me. The college fund your mother and I set aside? Gone. Your inheritance? Gone. You're cut off, as of this moment. You can't do that, Caleb was shouting now. Mom, tell him. But my mother, who had defended Caleb's every transgression for 24 years, sat silent as a stone. Deborah? Dad looked at her expectantly. After what seemed like an eternity, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. How could you, Caleb? What did we raise? The phone went silent, then erupted with Caleb's desperate pleas and excuses. Dad ended the call. Within a week, Caleb's life imploded spectacularly. His university informed him that without the next tuition payment, he would be dropped from his classes. Our extended family, who had always treated him as the golden child, now wouldn't take his calls. And Karen, in a final twist of irony, served him with child support papers. For the first time in his life, my brother faced consequences. For the first time, he wasn't the favorite, the chosen one, the golden child. He was just a man who had destroyed his family for nothing more than the thrill of taking what belonged to someone else. The divorce papers felt oddly insignificant in my hands, just a few sheets of paper to dismantle a life built on lies. My lawyer assured me the process would be straightforward given the circumstances. Karen had been unfaithful and now there was evidence. She won't get anything, he said confidently. The courts don't look kindly on infidelity, especially of this nature. Karen fought anyway, hiring an aggressive attorney who tried to paint me as cold, distant, and emotionally unavailable. None of it mattered when the DNA test results came back. Benjamin, the child I'd raised for 5 years, read bedtime stories to, taught to ride a bike, wasn't mine. He had never been mine. Karen came to see me the day after the results arrived. She was crying, makeup streaking down her face. Please, Jason, he loves you. You're the only father he's ever known. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just emptiness. Did you ever love me? I asked. Or was I just a convenient substitute for my brother? She flinched. It wasn't like that. I did love you, I still do, but not enough, I finished for her. Not enough to be faithful, not enough to tell me the truth. What about Benjamin? He's innocent in all this. Yes, he is, I agreed. And that's why I can't stay. He deserves better than a lie, better than parents who live in resentment. I walked away from the house, the marriage, and the child I had thought was mine. It was brutal, but I knew it was necessary. Some wounds can't heal if you keep reopening them. Meanwhile, Caleb's life spiraled. Dad followed through on his promise to cut him off completely. Without tuition money, he was forced to drop out of college in his final year. He tried borrowing from our uncles, cousins, anyone who might help, but word had spread within the family. No one would touch him. I heard through my father that Caleb had taken a job stocking shelves at a supermarket, moving into a rundown apartment with Karen and Benjamin. The golden child now worked nights for minimum wage, coming home to a woman who resented him for ruining her comfortable life, and a child confused by the sudden disappearance of the man he knew as Daddy. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my phone rang with Caleb's number. I almost didn't answer, but something, curiosity perhaps, made me pick up. Jason? His voice was unrecognizable, small, broken. What do you want, Caleb? I can't do this anymore, he sobbed. I can't pay rent, can't afford food. Karen hates me, blames me for everything. The kid won't stop asking for you. I said nothing, letting his desperation fill the silence. Please, Jason, talk to Mom and Dad. They'll listen to you. Tell them I've changed, that I'm sorry. A cold laugh escaped me. Sorry? After everything you've done, you think sorry means anything? I'm begging you, man, I've got nothing left. I closed my eyes, remembering all the times I'd begged him to stop, all the times I'd tried to reason with him, only to be met with cruelty. Remember when you told me I should kill myself? Remember when you stole my journal, my privacy, my dignity? And now you've come for what else? My compassion? Jason, please. You are not my brother, I said quietly. You never were. I hung up, and in that moment, I felt neither victory nor revenge. Just the quiet certainty that some people never change, and some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. That phone call with Caleb marked the true end of my past life. I moved into a downtown apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was mine alone. Each morning I woke to silence instead of arguments, to peace instead of tension. I started exercising again, reconnected with college friends, even began dating casually. For the first time since childhood, my life belonged entirely to me. At work, the promotion I'd been working toward for years finally came through. The extra income allowed me to invest, save, build something for myself. I had no one to support, no one draining my resources or my spirit. Dad and I developed a relationship I never thought possible. Twice a month, we met for golf and beers, talking as equals rather than father and son. He'd look at me with something I'd never seen before, respect. I'm proud of how you've handled all this, he told me one evening as we walked to the 18th hole. Lesser men would have broken. Mom struggled more with the new family dynamic. She still carried maternal instincts toward Caleb despite everything. Once, Dad caught her sending money to my brother behind his back. If you want to support him, Deborah, you can go live with him, Dad had told her coldly. But you won't do it from this house. It was the ultimatum she needed. She chose her marriage, her home, her remaining family. She chose, finally, not to enable the son who had caused so much destruction. As for Caleb and Karen, their lives became exactly what they deserved. My brother, a term I use only biologically now, works at an auto shop, fixing other people's vehicles while his own life remains broken beyond repair. Karen juggles part-time jobs to support Benjamin, coming home to a man she once thought was exciting, but now sees as the architect of her downfall. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they fight constantly. The passion that drove them to betray me has curdled into resentment. They stay together not from love but from having nowhere else to go, no one else who will have them. I could feel vindicated. I could take pleasure in their suffering. But the truth is, I rarely think about them anymore. Yesterday, I drove along the coast with the windows down, salt air filling my lungs. The road stretched endlessly before me, no particular destination in mind. For a moment, I thought about everything that had led me here, the pain, the betrayal, the years of being overlooked and mistreated. Then I let it go. The rearview mirror showed nothing but empty road behind me. Ahead, only possibilities. For the first time in my life, I am truly free. Not just from Caleb and Karen, but from the need for their approval, their love, their punishment. Free from the past that once defined me. I accelerated, feeling the engine respond instantly to my touch, carrying me forward into a future entirely my own.